All right, let's dive into something pretty unique today. We're going to be taking a look at excerpts from the Principia Discordia.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Discordianism?
I have heard of it, yes.
So think of it as like a religion,
Okay.
but not really like what you're used to. It's more
Yeah.
like a playful and sometimes satirical exploration of chaos as a driving force in the universe.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's definitely not your typical religious text, is it?
No.
The Principia Discordia is kind of like a foundational text, but presented with a wink and a nudge, I'd say.
Yeah, it's definitely not your grandma's scripture.
Exactly.
It's more like a cosmic comic book with some serious philosophical undertones.
Yeah.
And the mystery surrounding its origins just adds to the intrigue.
Oh, absolutely. The book itself is full of rumors and in-jokes about its authorship.
Really?
You'll find claims that it was penned by everyone from Alan Watts
Oh, wow.
to the Sufi order,
What?
even Richard Nixon in a moment of lucidity.
That's hilarious. It seems like they're poking fun at the very idea of taking religious authority too seriously.
You hit the nail on the head. But amidst all the playful misdirection, there's a more concrete answer.
Okay.
Robert Anton Wilson
Mm-hmm.
points to Gregory Hill as the primary author.
Gregory Hill, the self-proclaimed simple computer specialist.
Yeah.
Even that sounds like a bit of a Discordian joke, don't you think?
It does, doesn't it? Almost like they're hinting that there's more to this simple computer specialist than meets the eye.
Right.
Of course, we can't forget Carrie Thornley, the co-founder of Discordianism,
Right.
who also had a hand in shaping the book.
Now, Discordianism seems to turn a lot of traditional religious ideas on their head.
Yeah.
Instead of order,
Right.
it embraces chaos as the fundamental principle of reality.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's where Eris, the Greek goddess of chaos, discord, and confusion, takes center stage.
Okay.
She's like their patron deity, embodying the unpredictable nature of existence.
And their story of how Eris re-emerged is a classic example of Discordian humor. Both Hill and Thornley claim to have had this mystical experience with her
Why, you know?
in a bowling alley of all places.
It's a perfect blend of the profound and the absurd, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what makes Discordianism so captivating.
It is.
They then introduce this idea of the curse of Greyface,
Okay.
blaming society's obsession with order for a lot of human misery.
So Eris represents a sort of liberation from the rigid structures that we often impose on ourselves and the world around us.
You could say that it's not that Discordians are against order entirely.
Okay.
They just see it as one part of a larger,
Yeah.
more dynamic interplay
Yeah.
between order and chaos.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like they're saying that we need to find a balance
Yeah,
to embrace the inherent chaos of life without trying to control it completely.
exactly. And that's where their practices and philosophy get really interesting.
Okay.
The Principia Discordia outlines these practices that are a stark contrast to traditional religions.
Right.
They're meant to be thought-provoking and subversive, but also infused with a healthy dose of humor.
Like their 5 commandments, also known as the Pentabarf, right?
Yes, the Pentabarf is a perfect example of Discordian humor and philosophy in action.
Okay.
For instance, the third commandment encourages a weekly ritual
Uh-huh.
involving hot dog buns.
Wait, a hot dog bun ritual? That's, unexpected.
It is, isn't it? It's meant to be a playful jab at religions that have dietary restrictions on certain days.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, hot dog buns were Eris's solace
Mhm.
after experiencing the original snub.
The original snub. Okay, you're gonna have to explain that one.
Well, according to Discordian mythology,
Okay.
Eris was snubbed at a party thrown by the gods.
Okay.
This perceived injustice led to her tossing a golden apple into the crowd,
Mm-hmm.
inscribed with, "To the fairest."
Okay.
That act, they say, sparked the Trojan War.
So a seemingly insignificant act of chaos had far-reaching consequences. That's an interesting perspective on how seemingly small events can trigger massive change. But going back to the Pentabarf, what are some of the other commandments?
Well, the first commandment is fairly straightforward,
Okay.
declaring Eris as the one true goddess.
Okay.
But then you have the second commandment mandating the use of the official Discordian document numbering system.
Oh, wow.
The fourth commandment forbids eating hot dog buns altogether, except on Fridays when it becomes compulsory.
Oh, okay.
And finally, the fifth commandment says you should not believe what you read.
Wait, but doesn't that include the Principia Discordia itself?
Right.
How are we supposed to make sense of any of this when we can't even trust what we're reading?
That's the point.
Oh.
They're challenging you to question everything,
Okay.
even the very foundations of their own belief system.
All right.
It's about thinking for yourself
Yeah.
and not blindly accepting anything as absolute truth.
So Discordianism is more about a way of thinking, a
Yeah,
perspective on reality,
exactly.
than a set of rigid doctrines.
Exactly. It's
Mm.
about embracing the inherent chaos and absurdity of life and finding ways to play with it, to find meaning and even joy within it.
Okay, I'm starting to understand why this might appeal to people who feel restricted by more conventional belief systems.
Yeah.
It's like they're offering a different lens through which to view the world, one that embraces the unpredictable and the unexpected.
And that's where some of their other concepts come into play.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, there's the law of fives,
Huh.
which suggests that things tend to occur in patterns of five.
Oh, okay.
It's not about a literal interpretation, but more about noticing these recurring patterns and questioning their significance.
So it's like a playful invitation to see the world through a different lens, to notice things that we might otherwise overlook.
Precisely. And then there's the classification of saints,
Mm-hmm.
which ranks both real and fictional characters based on their saintly quality.
Okay, so when they say saintly, they're not talking about traditional ideas of piety or holiness.
Not necessarily. It's about recognizing individuals who, in their own unique ways, embody certain Discordian principles.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, think of characters like Yossarian from Catch-22,
Yep.
Don Quixote,
Mm-hmm.
or even Bacanon from Cat's Cradle.
Okay.
These are all characters who challenged the status quo,
Okay.
embraced absurdity,
Mm.
or found their own unique paths in a chaotic world.
It's fascinating how they're pulling from both literature and real life to illustrate their ideas,
And it's not just about highlighting these individuals as exceptional.
right?
It's about encouraging everyone to find that saintly potential within themselves,
Right.
to see the world through a Discordian lens and embrace the chaos in their own unique way.
So we've talked about the origins of Discordianism, its
Yeah.
playful approach to spirituality and some of its key concepts.
Right.
But what about the Discordian society itself?
I
What's
say.
that all about?
Well, it's not your typical organized religion with a hierarchical structure.
Right.
It's more of a decentralized network of individuals
Okay.
who resonate with Discordian principles
Mhm.
and enjoy exploring the creative potential of chaos together.
So there's no central authority or a set of rules defining how to be a good Discordian.
Not at all. It's all about individual expression and finding your own unique path within the chaotic tapestry of existence.
I love that they even have a concept for people who unintentionally contribute to chaos, right?
Yes.
They call them heuristic avatars.
That's right.
Mm.
And they offer Confucius as an example.
Oh, wow.
Like the universe has a way of keeping things interesting,
Right.
making sure that order never gets too entrenched.
That's brilliant. It seems like Discordian humor is all about finding the unexpected connections and uncovering the absurdity in even the most serious things.
It is.
Can you give me some other examples of their pranks or cultural interventions?
There are quite a few. One that stands out is the story of Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst,
Okay.
a fictional Marine dreamed up by Carrie Thornley.
Okay.
The idea was to insert this entirely fabricated character into the military bureaucracy
Okay.
and see what kind of chaos ensued.
And what happened? Did this fictional Marine actually cause any real disruptions?
Apparently, Ravenhurst's name began appearing on official documents and rosters,
Really?
causing quite a stir among the military brass.
Wow.
They couldn't figure out who this Ravenhurst character was,
Wow.
but his absence, or rather his non-existence, was definitely felt.
That's a perfect example of their playful subversion of authority.
Yeah,
They're not trying to overthrow the system, just point out its inherent absurdity.
exactly. And this approach extends to their embrace of nonsense.
Okay.
It's not about being silly for the sake of it.
Right.
They use nonsense as a tool for liberation, a way to break free from rigid thinking.
So they're challenging us to question the seriousness with which we often approach life,
Yeah.
and to find the humor in the absurdity of it all.
Precisely. Discordianism is all about embracing the unexpected, challenging assumptions and finding your own unique path within the chaos. And one of the ways they encourage this shift in perspective is through their concept of nonsense as salvation.
Okay, that's intriguing. How does nonsense fit into this idea of finding liberation?
Well, imagine a world that takes itself way too seriously, where everything is about finding the right answer or following a prescribed path.
Mm-hmm.
Discordianism uses nonsense to disrupt those rigid thought patterns, kind of like hitting the reset button on your brain.
So it's not just about being goofy for the sake of it. There's a deeper purpose behind this embrace of nonsense.
Absolutely. Think of it as a form of cognitive play, a way to loosen the grip of conventional thinking and open up new avenues of understanding.
That makes sense. Can you give me an example of how this Discordian nonsense plays out in practice?
Well, the Principia Discordia is full of paradoxical statements and nonsensical rituals.
Hmm.
For example, there's this story about the revelation of the honest book of truth to a figure named Lord Omar.
Hmm.
Instead of some grand prophetic text, it turns out to be a cigar box filled with random filing cards.
So they're saying that truth can be found in the most unexpected places, even in something as mundane as a cigar box.
Exactly. It's about challenging our assumptions about where we might find wisdom or meaning. It's like they're saying, don't limit yourself to the conventional paths. Truth can be messy, chaotic, and even a bit absurd.
It's a refreshing perspective in a world that often feels so obsessed with finding the right answers.
And that's what Discordianism encourages, embracing the mystery,
Yeah.
letting go of the need for absolute certainty,
Hmm.
and finding joy in the process of exploring the chaotic nature of existence.
But does that mean there's no structure or guidance within Discordianism? What about the practical aspects of living as a Discordian?
Well, it's important to remember that Discordianism is highly individualistic. There isn't a strict set of rules or a prescribed lifestyle,
Right.
but there are certainly recurring themes and practices that resonate with Discordians.
Like, what are some examples of these themes or practices?
They often emphasize the importance of playfulness, creativity, and nonconformity.
Okay.
You'll find that Discordians tend to be skeptical of authority, dogma, and rigid belief systems, and they often find joy in disrupting the status quo and challenging conventional thinking.
So it's about embracing the chaos and finding ways to create your own order within it.
Precisely. It's about becoming the artist of your own life, shaping the chaos into something meaningful and beautiful.
Speaking of finding beauty in unexpected places, the Principia Discordia has this interesting section on entropy. It's a scientific term that usually has pretty negative connotations,
Right.
but Discordians seem to see it differently.
Yes, they quote Norbert Wiener, a respected mathematician,
Mm.
who described entropy as the universe gradually moving toward a state of inert uniformity.
Oh, okay. On the surface, that doesn't sound very optimistic. It's like the universe is slowly winding down, losing its complexity and vibrancy.
Yeah.
How do Discordians find humor in that?
Well, they embrace this idea of inevitable decline, not as an ending,
Okay.
but as a transformation.
Okay.
They see entropy as a return to the primal chaos,
Right.
from which new forms and possibilities can emerge.
Okay.
It's like the end of one cycle gives way to the beginning of another.
So instead of fearing this running down of the universe, they see it as part of a larger cosmic dance.
Exactly. They even use the analogy of whirlpools
Okay.
to illustrate how order and complexity can arise even within a system that's moving toward entropy.
Okay.
These pockets of complexity defy the overall trend toward uniformity. Think of them as enclaves.
And these enclaves are where we find meaning and purpose.
Precisely, Discordians view life, especially human life, as one of these enclaves, where these little whirlpools of consciousness and complexity swirling around in a universe that's supposedly headed toward this inert uniformity.
It's a beautiful way to think about our place in the cosmos. It's like we're these little rebels defying the supposed inevitability of decline and creating our own pockets of meaning and beauty.
And that leads to another important aspect of Discordianism, personal responsibility.
Okay.
Even though they embrace chaos, it's not an excuse for inaction or nihilism.
Right.
They believe that because we are these enclaves of order and complexity, we have a responsibility to create, to
Yeah.
play, and to make the most of this brief moment of existence.
It reminds me of existentialist philosophy. It's like they're saying, yes, life is absurd,
Yeah.
but that's all the more reason to live it to the fullest, to
Right.
create our own meaning and purpose.
You're spot on. And this ties into how Discordians approach the idea of salvation.
Okay, I'm really curious about this. How does a religion that embraces chaos and absurdity approach the concept of salvation?
Well, in Discordianism, salvation isn't about escaping this world
Okay.
and reaching some sort of heavenly afterlife. They call it nonsense is salvation.
Right.
It's about finding liberation here and now in the midst of all the chaos and absurdity.
So how do we achieve this nonsense as salvation? What's the path?
The path, if you can call it that, is learning to play with the chaos, finding joy in the absurdity, and creating your own meaning and purpose in a world that often seems meaningless and absurd.
It's a powerful message and it resonates with me. It's about taking ownership of our lives, even in the face of chaos and uncertainty. It's about embracing the absurdity and finding the humor in it all. And it's about creating our own meaning rather than waiting for someone else to hand it to us.
Exactly. And Discordianism provides us with a unique set of tools and perspectives to do just that. Their calendar is a great example.
You mean the one that divides the year into 5 seasons of 73 days each?
Yes. Each season is associated with one of the 5 apostles of Eris.
Okay.
And they have these wonderfully evocative names like the season of chaos, the season of discord, and the season of confusion.
It's like they're deliberately turning the traditional calendar on its head, creating their own unique system for marking time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a hallmark of Discordianism, this playful subversion of convention.
Right.
It's about challenging the status quo, even in something as seemingly mundane as a calendar.
It's a reminder that we don't have to accept things as they are.
Yeah.
We can always choose to see things differently, to create our own systems and structures.
It's empowering, isn't it?
It is.
Discordianism reminds us that we have the power to shape our own realities. And speaking of shaping reality, we can't talk about Discordianism without mentioning Joshua Norton.
Joshua Norton, who's...
He was a real historical figure, the businessman in San Francisco who, after suffering some financial setbacks, declared himself Emperor of America.
Oh, wow.
He issued proclamations and decrees, often whimsical, but sometimes insightful, even ahead of their time.
So he was kind of like a real-life Discordian saint.
Exactly.
Someone who embraced the absurdity and challenged societal norms.
Exactly. Discordians see him as a visionary who dared to live life on his own terms, someone who challenged the conventions of his time.
Oh, wow.
They even consider his grave to be an official POEE shrine.
POE. Remind me what that stands for again.
The Paratheo Animetamysticood of Eris Esoteric.
Okay.
It's one of the main branches of Discordianism founded by Gregory Hill, the author of the Principia Discordia.
Ah, right. So it's like a denomination within the broader Discordian movement.
Exactly. And they revere Joshua Norton as a saint, a symbol of individual expression and nonconformity.
Okay.
They see him as a role model, someone who embodied Discordian ideals.
It's amazing how they've taken a figure who was often dismissed as eccentric or even delusional and reframed him as a visionary leader.
It speaks to their core philosophy, questioning our assumptions and reframing our perspectives. They encourage us to do the same. Speaking of questioning assumptions, let's talk a bit more about heuristic avatars.
The folks who unintentionally contribute to chaos.
Exactly. Besides Confucius, Discordians often cite figures like bureaucrats, politicians, and religious fanatics as examples.
So it's not just about individuals, it can also apply to institutions and systems.
Absolutely. Anytime you have a rigid system or ideology trying to impose order on a complex and chaotic world, you're likely to see the law of heuristic escalation in action.
So it's like they're saying the more we try to control things, the more likely they are to spiral out of control.
Exactly. And that's why Discordians encourage us to embrace the chaos.
Right.
To find ways to play with it and to create our own meaning and purpose within it.
So if they embrace chaos, do they even have a concept of evil?
That's a great question.
Or an opposing force to Eris?
Because it gets to the heart of how Discordians view the world. They don't see things in terms of a simple good versus evil duality like some traditional religions.
Okay.
They do have a figure called Greyface, representing order and conformity, but it's not that straightforward.
So Greyface isn't their version of the devil?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
They don't see Greyface as inherently evil. It's more like a force that can become destructive when taken too seriously.
Okay.
Remember the curse of Greyface?
Right.
It's about recognizing the potential dangers of blindly following order and conformity.
So it's more about finding a balance between order and chaos.
Right. Discordianism isn't about duality or opposition. It's about embracing the interplay of seemingly opposite forces.
That makes sense. It ties into their philosophy of non-attachment and playfulness. They're acknowledging that everything is in flux, that order and chaos are constantly interacting, and that we can find freedom by learning to move with that dance rather than trying to control it.
Precisely. And that's where their sense of humor comes in.
Yeah.
It allows them to detach from the seriousness with which we often approach life.
Right.
It's about finding the absurdity in it all and learning to laugh at ourselves and the human condition.
It sounds like a really liberating way to live.
Can be. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive, there's one more concept I'd like to explore.
Okay, what's that?
It's called Operation Mindfuck.
Oh, I've heard that term thrown around, but I'm not entirely sure what it means.
Operation Mindfuck is essentially a campaign of disinformation.
Oh.
They use pranks, hoaxes, and media manipulation to disrupt conventional thinking and expose the absurdity of the systems and beliefs that we often take for granted.
So it's like cultural jamming, using humor and satire to challenge the status quo.
Exactly. And it's been incredibly influential, inspiring countless artists activists, and subcultures.
Can you give me some examples of Operation Mindfuck in action?
Of course. Think of things like the Church of the Subgenius, a parody religion satirizing consumerism and televangelism, or the Illuminatus trilogy, a series of novels that blend Discordian philosophy and conspiracy theories and psychedelic imagery.
So they're using fiction and satire to make people think differently, to challenge their assumptions, and to open up new possibilities.
Precisely. And it's not always about overt political messages or social commentary. Sometimes it's about playing with ideas, creating disruptions, and seeing what happens.
That's great. It's like they're saying, let's shake things up and see what falls out.
That's the essence of Operation Mindfuck. It's about embracing the unpredictable, the absurd, and the unexpected.
Right.
It's about using humor and creativity to challenge the systems and beliefs that we often take for granted.
It sounds like a powerful tool for change, and it's clearly had a lasting impact on our culture.
Absolutely. And it all goes back to that core Discordian principle of embracing chaos. Operation Mindfuck is just one of the many ways it manifests.
It's a reminder that we don't have to accept things as they are. We can always choose to see things differently, to challenge the status quo, and to create our own realities. But speaking of creating realities, it seems like the Principia Discordia itself is a form of Operation Mindfuck, wouldn't you say? It's not just a book, it's more like a toolbox, you know?
Right.
Full of ideas and pranks and perspectives that encourage us to question everything and find our own unique path.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
It's like they're giving us permission to play with reality, to experiment, to question everything, and to find our own truth in the midst of all the absurdity.
We've touched on Discordian humor throughout this deep dive, but I'm curious to hear more about how it works.
Okay.
What makes it so unique and, dare I say, effective?
Well, it's more than just telling jokes or being silly.
Okay.
It's about using absurdity and paradox to disrupt our usual ways of thinking.
Right.
They call these disruptions mundos.
Mondo. What's that?
Think of it like a riddle or a Zen koan. It's a question or statement designed to provoke thought and challenge our assumptions.
So it's about using absurdity to kind of push past the limitations of logic and language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One example from the Principia Discordia is, did you know that God's name is Iris and that he is a girl?
Wow, that's a great example. It immediately challenges our preconceived notions about God, gender, and the nature of reality.
It's not about giving you a straight answer.
Right.
It's about making you question, explore, and ultimately find your own meaning in the chaos.
It's a brilliant approach.
Yeah.
And it really highlights that playful, subversive spirit that runs through Discordianism.
Discordianism is about more than just believing in Eris or following a set of rules.
Right.
It's about cultivating a certain attitude, a way of approaching life with humor, curiosity, and playfulness.
And speaking of approaching things differently, they seem to have a unique take on the concept of sin, one that differs quite a bit from traditional religions.
That's right. They don't see sin in the traditional sense of a moral transgression.
Right.
For them, it's more about the limitations we place on ourselves.
Limitations? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
One of their key teachings is that convictions cause convicts.
Okay.
They're suggesting that when we cling too tightly to our beliefs and become rigid in our thinking, we essentially imprison ourselves.
So sin is more about clinging to order, trying to impose our limited perspective on a reality that is inherently chaotic and unpredictable.
Precisely. And the way to break free from this self-imposed prison is to cultivate non-attachment.
Right.
To learn to flow with the chaos and embrace the absurdity of it all.
It's all starting to click now. It's about shifting our perspective, challenging our assumptions, and finding liberation in the midst of chaos.
And that brings us back to the question we posed at the beginning of this deep dive.
Right.
If Discordianism is about embracing chaos and finding humor in the absurdity of life, how might applying that perspective change the way you see the world?
That is a great question, and it's one that each listener will have to answer for themselves.
Absolutely.
But I think Discordianism gives us a valuable set of tools and perspectives for navigating the complexities of modern life.
Absolutely. It's about learning to laugh at ourselves, to question everything, and to find joy in the unexpected.
Right.
It's about embracing the chaos and creating our own meaning within it.
It's both liberating and empowering. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the wonderfully weird world of Discordianism, I encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. Remember, there's no single right way to be a Discordian, It's all about finding your own path, embracing the absurdity, and creating your own beautiful chaos. And with that, we leave you with one final thought to ponder. If Eris is the goddess of chaos and discord, is she also the goddess of possibility? Could it be that within the chaos lies the potential for infinite creativity, transformation, and even liberation? Hail Eris, all hail Discordia.